Let's get more reaction to this developing situation in Syria this morning. I'm joined by The Sun's political correspondent, Martina Betts, and political journalist, Alicia Fitzgerald. I think what I always do in situations like this is I take it back to the people. And there'll be many ordinary people waking up this morning with a new reality, Martina, that Assad's brutal regime is over.
Yeah, it looks like there's reports that he has now fled the country. He's on a plane. We don't know where he's gone. My bets are that he's in Russia right now. But what we were talking about earlier is that we should not underestimate Assad's instinct for survival. So has he gone to Russia to try to convince Vladimir Putin that he needs the military might of Russian forces to then launch a counter-offensive? We don't really know yet. What it's looking is that these rebel forces are potentially going to be the new regime in Syria. What that means for ordinary people, we still don't know, because these rebel forces are no longer affiliated with Al-Qaeda, but we know they're still very conservative. So that presents challenges for civilians, for women, for minorities. And the answer is that we still don't know.
Yeah, Alicia, Martina makes a really good point about Assad heading potentially to Russia to seek refuge there. But what use will he be now to Vladimir Putin?
Well, it's really interesting. I think there was a spokesman from the US who actually called that Assad's regime would topple about 8 days ago. And he said that he thinks that this was on purpose, that the opposition have chosen to target Assad now when he knows that Russia is preoccupied in its own conflict. Iran, another key ally of the Assad regime, is also obviously tied up in another conflict. So picks a time where he doesn't have a lot of support. His main allies are obviously facing such difficult crises themselves that it's unlikely the support that they can offer to the Assad regime at the moment is going to be as much or as strong as it would have been had they not been so preoccupied. So there is a bit of a feeling that that was part of the plan, picking that time of weakness, that moment of weakness. That's not to say that he won't find some support in Putin or in Russia, but it's definitely weaker than normal.
Yeah, and the region, meanwhile, huge challenges for countries bordering Lebanon, no least.
Absolutely. And just to pick up on Russia, I think it's important to note the fact that Russia still has a very important naval base and air base in Syria.
Absolutely.
So what they will want to do next, will they want to broker a deal where they just manage to secure those areas? Because, you know, there's still interest in having those places, those military bases.
Yeah, they don't just give them up and walk away.
So I think it's all still very uncertain in what the Russians might do next. In terms of the wider region and in terms of what it means, for instance, for the UK, it's quite interesting. Keir Starmer is going for his first trip to the Middle East, I think later on today. But it presents challenges in terms of foreign policy, in terms of humanitarian efforts. The UK is one of the biggest donors to Syria. I think we've donated 3.2 billion to Syria so far. And also in terms of the wave of refugees that this conflict could spark, because there's several key figures in the cabinet now, West Streeting, Rachel Reeves, who at the time of the civil war were calling on then Home Secretary Theresa May to accept more Syrian refugees. The question is, will that goodwill follow them to government?
And there'll be so many refugees that fled to, say, Germany or Jordan. I remember visiting the Zaatari refugee camp and overwhelmingly speaking to children there who just wished that they could go back home. And that will be a thought for people watching this, wherever they are, scattered around the world, about going home to Syria, Alicia.
Absolutely. And I think it's in news, often we talk about refugees in quite a formal manner, in the sense of that they are political logistics, I suppose.
Absolutely.
You know, that these people will go to this place and this place will accept X people. And actually you forget sometimes, as you were saying, Leah, lots of these are their children, and they have had their childhood stripped away from them. They don't have a home. They don't have anywhere. They haven't had the freedom of childhood that most people here, for example, have had the luxury of. And I think it's important to remember that when talking about refugees and when talking about these crises, that these are human lives that are being really radically stripped apart.
And just very briefly, Martina, a new dawn for Syria potentially here.
Yeah, a new dawn, lots of uncertainty, especially for the people there. We know the economy was already on its knees. These rebel groups want Aleppians to drop their own currency, and the costs are shooting up. So there will be lots of instability in the next few days and weeks.
That's it, because obviously there are celebrations that the brutal regime has toppled, but it's not without some hesitation and some concern as well. I mean, the opposition groups, lots of them used to be affiliated with Al Qaeda, for example. The leader of ISIS was also involved in making HTS one of the key opposition rebel groups. So there is some concern about what this will bring. Fine, it might be a bit more stable than the Assad regime, but again, it's uncertain and we just don't know what to expect yet.
Yeah, and it will be a keen eye as politicians do the rounds this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner will be on the airwaves this morning. So it'll be interesting to see what she says, but also very interesting, I think, what the incoming Donald Trump administration will do, because Donald Trump has already been tweeting on his social media account saying that this is not a fight for the US. So what will that bring?
Okay, Martina Alicia, thank you so much for your insights on this. We will be back after a short break.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered.